Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by tapping into a very specific feeling. I think everyone listening has felt
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
You open your phone, you check your email, maybe you glance at the news or a quarterly report, and you just feel heavy.
Drowning. It's the sensation of drowning in data.
Exactly. It's not just that there's too much of it, it's that it all feels so disconnected. We have all these dots, headlines, stats, feedback forms, tweets,
Right.
but we have absolutely no idea how to connect them. We see the data points, but we don't actually know what's going on.
That is the classic painful distinction between information and knowledge. I mean, we're hoarding dots, but we aren't drawing the lines.
Which brings us to today's stack of notes. We're diving into a comprehensive guide on theory in research by Dr. Ali Akbar. Now, I have to be honest with you and with you listening. When I first saw that title, Theory in Research, my brain immediately flashed back to a warm lecture hall at 9 a.m. where I was, struggling to keep my eyes open.
I get that. It does sound incredibly dry. Theory is one of those words that just feels like it belongs in an ivory tower, not in the real world.
But, and this is a big, but as I actually read through Dr. Akbar's work and the sources he cites, I realized this isn't about academia at all. This is a toolkit for critical thinking. It is basically a defense mechanism against getting fooled by randomness.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Dr. Akbar is essentially arguing that without a theory, any attempt to understand the world is just wandering around in the dark. Theory is the flashlight.
Or, to use a better metaphor, it's the map.
The map, yes.
So that is our mission today. We're going to unpack this map. We're going to look at the massive philosophical battle between black and white facts versus, shades of gray reality.
Okay.
We're going to break down how your environment shapes you using something called ecological systems theory. And finally, we're going to look at a real data set to see if we can find the signal in the noise.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's start with the word itself. Theory. If I'm at a bar with friends and I say, I have a theory about why my football team keeps losing, I usually just mean I have a hunch.
Right, or a guess, or you're just venting.
Exactly.
That is the colloquial use. I have a theory it's going to rain today. That is just speculation. But in the context of this research and in Dr. Akbar's guide, theory is a rigorous, heavy-duty tool. It is not a guess.
The source cites Wimmer and Dominic, who define it as a systematic view specifying relationships among concepts, which is a bit of a mouthful.
It is a bit dense. Let's strip the jargon away. Look at the definition from Corley and Gioia. They say a theory describes the relationships that show how and why something happens.
How and why?
That is the key difference. It is not just recording what happened, it is explaining the mechanics underneath.
So if I see an apple fall from a tree...
The apple falling is the event. That is the what? Gravity is the theory. Gravity explains the relationship between the mass of the apple and the mass of the earth. It gives you the why and the how.
The source material actually breaks this down into 4 pillars that make a theory valid. And I think these are great because they act like a filter for BS in everyday life.
Right.
If someone pitches you an explanation for something, a politician or a salesperson, you can check it against these 4 things.
Let's walk through them.
First, a theory has to be abstract. It can't be tied to just one single event.
Meaning, if your explanation only works for that one apple on that one Tuesday in October, it is not a theory.
Yeah.
It is just a description of a moment.
Right.
A real theory has to apply broadly across different situations. It has to cover all apples, maybe even oranges too.
Second, it has to be explanatory. It has to reveal relationships. Third, it has to be predictive.
That is that roadmap function you mentioned. If your theory is good, you should be able to look at a new situation and say, based on these conditions, X is likely to happen.
Okay.
If you can't predict anything, if you're always just explaining things after they happen, you don't really understand the system.
And the fourth one, which I think is the most important for avoiding arrogance, is that it must be testable and adaptable.
This is the safety valve. A theory is not religious scripture. It is a tool. If new data comes in that contradicts the theory, like if we suddenly found an apple falling up into the sky, the theory has to break.
It has to change.
It has to change. If you can't test it and you can't change it, it's not a theory, it's a belief.
So what? Why should you care? Dr. Akbar provides a roadmap for research as the #1 reason. But I'd argue it provides a roadmap for problem solving.
Absolutely. If you don't have a theory, you don't even know what questions to ask. You are just staring at a problem, hoping an answer jumps out at you. Theory tells you where to look.
Okay, so we have our map, but here is where the notes get really interesting and, frankly, a bit trippy. The source material dives into a massive philosophical divide.
Ah, yes, the great divide.
This is the engine room of how researchers and people see reality. We are talking about positivism versus interpretivism. Now, I'll admit, when I first saw these words, I kind of wanted to skip to the next page.
I don't blame you. It sounds like philosophy class jargon.
It does, but the definitions in the notes are actually describing a battle for the nature of reality.
It really comes down to two big questions. Ontology, which asks, what is reality? And epistemology, which asks, how do we know what we know?
Let's break down the two sides, because Dr. Akbar has a great comparison table here. In the red corner, we have positivism. This is what I usually think of when I think of science with a capital S.
Generally, yes. Positivism is the scientist's view. It is deductive. You start with a hypothesis, you test it, you get a result. The core worldview here is that reality is black and white.
The notes use the example of a fire.
Right. Think about a fire. To have fire, you need three things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. That is a chemical fact. It doesn't matter if I think the fire's beautiful or if you think it's scary.
It just is.
It just is. It doesn't matter if we are in London or Bangkok. The chemical reaction is objective. It exists independently of us.
So the positivist is looking for universal laws. If A happens, B will always happen.
Correct. They want objective, value-free data, usually numbers. They want to measure the world with a ruler. And they believe if you measure it precisely enough, you find the truth.
But then in the blue corner, we have interpretivism. This feels more like the sociologist or the historian.
Or the anthropologist. Interpretivism is inductive. It doesn't start with a hypothesis. It starts with the messy details and tries to find meaning. Its worldview is gray and subjective.
The source had a quote here that says, "For an interpretivist, reality and the observer are inseparable." That is a heavy concept.
It is. It means you cannot separate the facts from the people experiencing them. You can't use a ruler to measure a culture or a feeling.
The example Dr. Akbar uses here is a teacher. Specifically, a teacher trained in the UK who moves to teach in Thailand.
Exactly. A positivist might try to measure teaching effectiveness based solely on test scores. They might say, well, the inputs are the same, so the output should be the same.
But an interpretivist says,
wait a minute. You can't just measure inputs and outputs. The culture in the UK is different. The hierarchy in Thailand is different. The teacher's personal history matters. The student's expectations matter.
So an interpretivist would say there is no universal law of teaching.
Right. They aren't looking for a law that applies to everyone everywhere. They are looking to deeply understand that specific case. They embrace the complexity. They accept that reality is constructed by the people living it.
So positivism says there is one reality. Let's measure it. Interpretivism says there are multiple realities constructed by people. Let's understand them.
That is a brilliant summary. And here is the kicker. Neither one is better.
The notes emphasize selecting the right lens.
Right. Exactly. If you are testing a new heart medication, please be a positivist. I want objective biological facts. I don't care how the heart feels about the medicine. I want to know if it works.
Right.
But if you are trying to understand why a marketing campaign failed in a specific neighborhood, you better be an interpretivist because the facts are all about perception, culture, and meaning.
I love that. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. You don't use a hammer to paint a wall, and you don't use a paintbrush to drive a nail.
Precisely. And most of us get into trouble because we are using the wrong tool. We try to be positivists with our relationship.
I did the dishes, so you should be happy.
Exactly. Or we try to be interpretivists with our finances.
Okay, let's move from the abstract philosophy to a concrete model. I wanted to see a theory that fits that interpretivist side, something that handles the messy complexity of human life. The source provides a perfect one. Ecological Systems Theory.
This is a classic. It was developed by Uri Bronfenbrenner. It's often used in child development, but honestly, you can apply it to anyone, an employee, a voter, a consumer.
I want you to visualize this. The source has a diagram of concentric circles, like a target or, ripples in a pond.
Picture yourself in the very center. That is the individual. That circle contains your biology, your age, your sex, but also your internal stuff, your motivation, your health, your curiosity.
Okay, I'm in the center. Now, the next ring out is the microsystem.
These are the people and places you interact with directly, face-to-face, your family, your coworkers, your roommates. This is your front row of life. This is where your daily life actually happens.
Okay, then outside that is the mesosystem. Meso usually means middle. This one confused me a bit in the notes. It says it's about connections.
It is the trickiest one, but also the most insightful. The mesosystem isn't a place. It is the relationship between your microsystems.
Oh, I see.
Think about a child. They have a home microsystem and a school microsystem. The mesosystem is the relationship between the parent and the teacher.
So if the parent and teacher hate each other.
Exactly. If the parent and teacher are in conflict, that impacts the child, even if the child isn't in the room when they argue. The wires are crossed. If your work life and your home life are at war, that creates stress in the mesosystem, which hits you in the center.
That is a huge insight. It's not just the dots, it's the wires connecting the dots.
Yeah.
If the wires are crossed, the system fails. Okay, next ring out. Exosystem.
The exosystem involves environments where you aren't an active participant, but they still hit you.
The source lists parents' jobs as an example for a child.
Right. If you're a kid, you don't go to your dad's office. You aren't part of that microsystem. But if your dad has a terrible, high-stress boss and comes home angry every night, that boss, who you have never met, is impacting your life. That is the exosystem.
It is the stuff happening over there that lands on your doorstep.
Pretty much. Then the massive outer ring. The macrosystem.
The big picture.
The big picture. Culture. Laws. Economic systems. Being raised in a capitalist democracy versus a socialist dictatorship affects everything in the inner circles. It is the water you swim in.
And there's one more dimension mentioned in the notes that cuts through all the circles like an arrow, the chronos system.
Time. We exist in time. This covers two things. Your personal timeline, like getting married or a parent dying, and historical time. Growing up during the Great Depression is different from growing up during the TikTok era. The time changes how all the other systems interact.
So why does a researcher or just a regular person trying to solve a problem use this? Let's say we have a student, let's call him Sam. Sam is failing 10th grade.
Without a theory, you might just look at the individual level. You'd say, Sam is unmotivated, Sam is lazy, Sam needs to study more.
That's the positivist isolated view. It's clean, it's simple, and it blames Sam. But with ecological systems theory,
You start asking questions at every level. You look at the microsystem. Is Sam being bullied by a peer? You look at the mesosystem. Do Sam's parents trust the school, or do they badmouth the teachers at dinner? You look at the exosystem. Did the school board just change the grading policy?
it stops you from blaming the victim. It forces you to see the web.
Exactly. The source actually gives a formula for drafting research questions using this. How does level 1 factor and level 2 factor influence outcome?
So how does motivation, individual, and teacher support microsystem influence Sam's grades?
Precisely. Now, you aren't just guessing. You are testing the relationship between specific layers of his life. You are looking for the malfunction in the system, not just the person.
This leads us perfectly into the final segment, the engine room. We've got the philosophy, we've got the theoretical model. Now we have a pile of data. The source has a section on data analysis that connects all of this.
This is where many people get stuck. They have the survey results or the interview notes, but they don't know what it means. They have data, but no knowledge.
There's a quote here from Shamu and Resnick that frames this perfectly. They say analysis is about distinguishing the signal from the noise.
Signal versus noise. That is the whole ballgame.
So how does theory help us find the signal? The notes talk about mapping and pattern matching.
Mapping is connecting your data points back to those theoretical constructs we just talked about. If you have an interview transcript, you don't just read it like a novel, you scan it. You look for sentences that relate to microsystem or motivation.
You categorize the chaos.
You do. And pattern matching is comparing what you see in the real world with what your theory predicted would happen.
And if it doesn't match?
If your theory says high teacher support should lead to high engagement, you look at your data to see if that pattern holds. If it doesn't, you have a mystery to solve.
And the source actually gives us a mini case study here. There is a data table regarding student engagement scores. I want to walk through this because it perfectly illustrates how theory changes what you see.
Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, we have a few students. Let's look at student A. Student A has a high engagement score, 4.5 out of 5. Their motivation, which is the individual level, is a 5. Teacher feedback, microsystem, is a 4.
That is a clean pattern. High motivation plus good support equals high engagement. The theory holds. Everything is working as expected.
But then look at student C. Engagement is low, 2.8. Motivation is low, 2.
Now, stop there. If you didn't have a theory, you might just close the book. You'd say, well, student C has low motivation. That's the problem. They need to try harder.
Right. You'd fix the individual, you'd send them to a tutor or punish them. But the table has another column, assessment policy clarity.
Right.
This is an exosystem factor, the rules of the game set by the administration. For student A, the high achiever, policy clarity is a 5. crystal clear. For student C, the struggling student, policy clarity is a 2.
Uh-huh. Now the lens shifts. Is student C unmotivated because they're lazy? Or are they unmotivated because the rules of the assessment are confusing?
The theory, specifically the ecological theory, forces you to look at that exosystem column. It suggests that the low motivation might be a symptom, and the unclear policy is the cause.
And that changes the solution entirely. You don't yell at student C to work harder. You fix the assessment policy. That is the power of theory. It moves you from correlation to potential causation, or at least to a much deeper understanding of the problem.
That is the signal, right there. The noise was just, student C is failing. The signal is the policy is unclear.
And notice how we combine the levels. We looked at the individual, which was motivation, and the exosystem, which was policy. That is exactly what Dr. Akbar's guide encourages.
It really is a roadmap. It took us from a random spreadsheet of numbers to an actionable insight about school policy.
And that is why research and critical thinking is so much more than just collecting data. Anybody can collect data. Making sense of it requires a framework.
So let's bring this all home. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We certainly have.
We started by redefining theory, not as a hunch, but as a systematic roadmap composed of abstract, testable concepts.
We looked at the great divide between positivism, the objective black and white search for laws, and interpretivism, the subjective gray search for meaning.
And we learned that neither is right or wrong, they're just different lenses. We zoomed in on ecological systems theory, visualizing those concentric circles from the individual out to the macro culture, and remembering that we can't ignore the environment when judging a person's behavior.
And finally, we saw how to use that theory to filter data, separating the signal from the noise, and realizing that a student's failure might be a policy failure, not a personal one.
Now, I want to pivot to you, the listener. Why does this matter if you aren't writing a PhD thesis? Why should someone listening on their commute care about ontology?
Because you are always operating on a theory, whether you know it or not.
Let's tell me more about that.
If you are a manager and your team is underperforming, you have theory. Maybe your theory is people are lazy, so you micromanage. That's a positivist, individual-focused theory.
Hi.
Maybe your theory is the systems are broken, so you look at the workflow. That's a more ecological approach.
So if you aren't aware of the theory you are using, you are basically a slave to it.
Exactly. You will keep trying the same solutions because your map tells you that is the only road. Being aware of the theory gives you the power to swap maps.
To say, wait, this lens isn't working. Let me put on the interpretivist glasses for a second. Let me look at the cultural context.
It creates flexibility in your thinking. It prevents you from being blindsided by factors you didn't even think to look for. It allows you to see the invisible wires.
It's critical thinking 101, wrapped in academic language.
I would agree.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a thought based on that interpretivist section we discussed.
Go for it.
We talked about how, in the interpretivist view, reality is socially constructed and the researcher is part of the research.
Yes, the subjective reality.
If that's true, if we can never truly separate ourselves from what we observe, can we ever really know anything objectively? Or are we all just telling ourselves stories that make sense to us based on our own little location in the ecological system?
That is the ultimate question. Are we discovering the truth or are we constructing it?
Something to chew on while you're navigating your own microsystems today. Thanks for diving in with us.
It was a pleasure.
See you on the next deep dive.